So I've had a cancellation for a session while I'm at the barn over in Stoke Cannon. So I've driven up to Stoke Woods just to sit in a bit of nature, go for a stroll. And now I'm sat in the car park and I'm slightly anxious because a couple of cars are pulled up. Might be a local rumour, but I've got a feeling that some nefarious, I think that's the right word, activities of the canine variety might go on here. Not that I would know either way. That's too much information. Anyway, so I'm a bit anxious, but I'm not that anxious. It's maybe affecting me. I'm gibbering on a little bit in this recording. But it's not completely, he says as he loses his train of thought, it's not completely put me off what I'm doing. And I think, you know, something I've been thinking about a lot recently and working with some young people around is levels of anxiety, because, you know, for a long time, that word anxiety wasn't that well used. We would often look at neurodivergent young people's behaviour with a kind of behavioural lens and look at perhaps functionality. Is it instrumental for a purpose? Is it chosen? We'd quite often look at it as being challenging. Unfortunately, people would go down the route of kind of consequential or punitive measures because of that. More recently, we've been, I think, moving towards a better understanding of the emotions going on, the levels of distress, the levels of anxiety, or the anxiety that person experiences, and how that can affect behaviour and the body and the brain and all those kind of things. And now that word's quite common, and a lot of the young people I work with use it, talk about it, and sometimes it is often the thing that they will say is stopping them either attending the session or school or another challenge, I suppose. And I think what's difficult is that if we are honest about anxiety, there are always going to be times where to be able to do something regularly without anxiety, you have to do it for a while with anxiety. So, you know, for example, I really enjoy presenting, delivering training, things like that to organisations, webinars, all that kind of stuff. I always enjoyed it a bit, but I would get very nervous. I'd drink lots of coffee. I'd have like a migraine after I'd finished just from being so... I'd have to do lots of prep. I'd be up at like 5 a.m. adjusting slides. And that's not really the way I am now. I'm a bit more relaxed. I know the information's there. I just need a sort of bullet point plan so that I make sure I hit the key points and that kind of stuff. You know, in the past, I might have been creating scripts and bits and little, you know, things like that. Whereas now I'm more comfortable and I don't feel that same anxiety about doing it. Now, it wasn't a level of anxiety where it I suppose the way I felt afterwards, it probably was just above my capabilities emotionally, but there was a lot of caffeine going on, so that might have been more to do with that. But I think, you know, it didn't always affect what I did, not negatively enough for me to not be able to do it or not do it well from the feedback I was getting. And actually, once I would get going in a presentation, it would pass. So that is a level of anxiety we can work with. Now, that higher level, which I personally, you know, I struggle sometimes to fully empathise because I have not really felt that in a large amount for whatever reason. Not for a long time. You know, when I was very young, I was very shy, but I didn't feel uncomfortable in my shyness. I just kept quiet and had the conversations in my head, which I thought would be better for everyone involved, and then started saying them and people started laughing and reacting, so that made everything worse for everyone. Anyway, another tangent there. So with that anxiety, I think what we're sometimes unable to do with that word anxiety is give enough information about, is that an acceptable, understandable, workable level of anxiety? you know, I'm not sure what it is for that person, and it's not for my place to say, oh, come on, you should just get on with it, it'll get easier. That's not for me to say, because I'm not in their brain, body, mind. But I think it's always important, whilst we are perhaps being more connected and backing off but not backing down, such as today when someone is too anxious for something, we're always also trying to support them to understand, okay, well, if you had to give that a score out of 10, I'm not a massive fan with sort of concrete 10-point scales, but I think what we should have is a way of understanding that there are different levels of anxiety. Some can be workable and get easier. Some will do you, unfortunate, probably long-term harm if you do those too often. And some will make you completely overwhelmed and overloaded and have perhaps a meltdown whilst it's happening. Some are not only workable, but they're actually advantageous. You know, there is an arousal level that helps performance. So you might actually, you know, you might have a young person who's very sort of heightened when they play a computer game that they're particularly good at, and they're really aware, and actually they wouldn't call it anxiety, but you could be reflecting to them. But that's kind of similar. That's not anxiety, but kind of excitement. I think, again, I quite often talk to young people about how excitement and anxiety are quite closely linked biologically, physiologically, just so that we're not creating a situation where someone feels those symptoms, and because they've probably got so much trauma around, I guess, times where their anxiety hasn't been listened to, they might be very quick to just completely withdraw. And that doesn't, again, mean that you should be pushing, even if you think they might be doing that. But it means we might just need to be, I guess, assessing anxiety in a deeper way, rather than just using it as a cover-all for things that we can't always do. Because then it, you know, gets quite bad press in that regard. Anxiety is something that stops me doing something. No. Anxiety is a bit like, I suppose, I mean, probably shouldn't use this with a young person, but, you know, alcohol might be something that if you have a bit, you relax and have a nice time. You have too much, you throw up and it's awful. You have too much too often, it will destroy your life, you know. And maybe anxiety is like a pint of lager. There you go, that's the culmination of this 8-minute rant. So hopefully that's useful for someone somewhere.